I'm Bill. This is our Cryptology news update. We'll do news bulletins, review and update on post-quantum cryptography, which is the big scary, and our historic vignette. I will not drag through the bibliography, but the long form will be posted by Jabber later, along with the short form, so you can see all the stuff I leave out. When you hear somebody in the C-suite say abundance of caution, the executive really means, oh boy, what the flying squirrel was that? One of your options in OpenSSL is to turn off use of obsolete hashes for signatures. Fedora has sensibly set that off by default. We might want to do that on our non-Fedora systems too. I suspect the other distros might pick this up. This is a good thing. If a hash is broken, maybe don't use it. The Internet research team has a request for comments out on a new digital signature system that is provides something that's similar to but different from the Byzantine generals problem, in that it allows a committee to sign something where it takes pick up. If you want a majority 3 out of 5, you want to say 4 out of 5, you want to say 3 out of 7, pick your numbers. And it takes that many people using their key fragments to sign something where the signature will pass validation. It's not completely proof against things like denial of service. If the coordinator is malicious, well, it's not going to work. But a corrupt coordinator still needs M-1 people to agree with him to get something signed. So it's an interesting concept. Legislation around the world is threatening to end end-to-end encryption. Governments really dislike not being able to spy on us. Now, there are portions of the government that think not spying on us is a good thing. People that saw the September that my friend Shava was our guest speaker after my news segment may remember that the Office of Naval Research went to bat for the Tor project when NSA and CIA were upset about it being strong encryption that the bad guys could use. ONR said, you know, when we have SEALs behind enemy lines, they'd like to be able to connect securely from a cafe while they're in disguise. So, yeah, we like this project. We're giving them money. So don't make trouble for them. And the anarchists really objected to accepting Navy money. Go figure. Anyway, so there's some hope for sensible governments. The European Court of Human Rights has said that mandatory back doors are against the EU's idea of human rights. Hopefully that'll be agreed all around. But the back door that was installed by AT&T and Verizon in the telephone system was used by China to hack the whole U.S. So, you know, bad mandated backdoors are a bad idea, and they keep trying to do it. So the big oopsie of the year, a compression package was social engineered to take on a new maintainer and caused a serious vulnerability in SSH. This blew up over Easter weekend and was found because somebody's performance test, their benchmarking, showed a horrible drop off in performance after they spun up a new VM. They got new versions of, I think it was Debian Unstable SID. But this got it discovered and fixed before it got into the stable releases of Linux systems, which is a good thing. But it's really scary that backdooring a dependency could chain through 3 projects into a security critical project that was using it. Now, SSH doesn't directly use the compression. System D was loading the compression, and SSH has to talk to System D in order to start its server. So it was crosswise, and your object-oriented packages like C++ have code that runs when the library's loaded. So you don't even have to use it. System D had opened a ticket on their tracker to get rid of dependencies that were excessive, including this particular XZ package, which may have caused the long game attacker, probably a nation state, to expedite their attack, which may have caused the performance problem, which caused the discovery. So that's a good thing. But hilarity ensued. So you remember the XKCD cartoon? If not, now, have I been complaining about System D being a universal threat space? One thing to break everything? I think I've been saying that for several years. There were a bunch of other SSH problems. Putty's private version of SSH went and used the NSI, the NIST keys that were sort of suspect, and they tried to use them in a way that would be efficient in virtual machines that didn't have sufficient random entropy to generate safe random numbers. Well, please don't use unsafe random numbers except when you absolutely have to. Don't mandate it for everybody. Efficiency is not your friend in cryptography. Don't do that. And more SSH breaks. A decade-old attack that we thought we protected. Well, in certain implementations, the countermeasures that OpenSSH have aren't in place, and 1/3 of RSA keys may fail in a way that the signature exposes the key as it's the bad signature is sent out. And this was the closed source SSH implementations. Now, did they have a copy paste of example code that wasn't really good enough? Could be, we don't know. And there's another one that had a logo an old race condition in the OpenSSH server. The critical if statement that would prevent the race condition was skipped by the latest patches. They rebugged the fixed bug. This is what you call a regression. And it was advertised as being glibc Linux only, but guess what? Windows 11 PowerShell uses the Linux version. And I would guess WSL uses the Linux version also on Windows. And it didn't fix as quickly. And maybe OpenSSH should include fixed bugs in their regression test suite. Maybe it's a good idea. The nation states prefer you to use Telegram to Signal because it's harder to secure a Telegram connection, and people can't tell which of their Telegram connections are secure or not because it's really kind of opaque. So they've been prompting Telegram to criticize Signal, and the nation states have been criticizing Signal, hoping to get everyone to drop Signal, which is secure, and use Telegram, which is secure only if you're talking to one person and only if you're very, very careful to set up a secure connection, really for real this time for sure. And why is elongated muskrat attacking Signal along with the not so nice nation states and Telegram? What's in it for him? It galls me that Kaspersky actually said something sensible on this when he's owned by one of those nation states. The latest Apple M chip has a hardware flaw, or probably firmware that's burned in, that can leak your encryption keys if somebody untrusted is running on your Mac and can keep an eye on what you're doing. It's what you call side channel. Watching the power or fan speed or something, they can start collecting bits of your key one at a time that they watch you cipher things. This is not good. If you have things to hide, don't run untrusted software on your computer because it may see things you don't think it can see. This study is actually several years old, but it went viral earlier this year. This is a graph of every possible 4-digit PIN and how common it was in a breach that had 3.5 million pins in it. You can see birthdays, European birthdays, repeated pairs, and several specific hot numbers. It's really kind of distressing. Now, if you go look at my notes later, do not use the 20 least used 4-digit pins that were listed in the same report, because the bad guys saw this report 10 years ago and already have the 20 least used ones in their list of the top 40 to try when trying to bust a 4-digit pin. And the 6 and 8-digit pins in a different data dump were just as bad. the YubiKey, which is a preferred two-factor auth, it also has a side channel attack where somebody controlling the machine a YubiKey is plugged into and then requests it to sign something um, could monitor the hardware port and make inferences about the key it's using. So, just like if you have keys on a USB thumb drive, never leave it unattended on your desk. Um, don't stick it in a hostile machine. Boot the alternate operating system before sticking it into a computer you don't trust. So 10 years ago, a grad student busted the myth of Bitcoin anonymity. Somebody did a 10-year retrospective reminding people of it last January. And we find out that the grad student is now a full professor at University College London. Go team. And the rest of the news, Windows didn't eliminate their internal Microsoft 1024-bit RSA keys until recently. There's yet more new work on the Vignette manuscript that actually looks vaguely interesting. For those who care, take a look at it. For those who don't, please feel free to ignore it. Radius, a different brand of authentication hardware-software combo, is not proof against a man-in-the-middle attack because they made up their own authentication protocol and it was just as bad as you expect. And in general, the protocols, the implementations, the people are frequently the problem. The core cryptography is frequently sound unless it's made up by people that shouldn't be making their own codes. And please do not check your private keys in with your GitHub source code. In general World War II history news, they declassified more pictures of the Colossus computer that was used on Tunny codes and Dulles Hill Laboratory, where it was built for Bletchley Park by the British telephone system, had their war diary finally declassified. So neat things for historians. That's the end of the main news segment, but we'll take a look at what's new in post-quantum cryptography and quantum cryptanalysis of classical. I'm going to flip through the review slides that haven't changed quickly, which are included in the slide deck for people who haven't seen this segment before. There's a slight improvement on Shor's algorithm for factoring, but it's not that great of improvement. And I'll have an update on whether the Chinese academics have something. They had two more announcements this year. But, be careful with your random numbers. They broke most of the contributors to the National Institute of Standards and Technology cryptography bake-off. But on schedule in August, They announced standards for 3 of the 4 winners of the bake-off, and the 4th winner standard will be released soon, as well as 2 backups. Standards for the backups will be released, and they're aiming to have certification next year or the year after. And yes, one of the no, I can't do. I tried to highlight something and it paged over. There we go. Crystal's Kyber project uses dilithium, that's Star Trek mentioned for you, as their signature scheme. So yeah, there are some nerds involved, our kind of nerds. New Scientist noted that multiple countries nearly simultaneously, unilaterally, with the same wording, have put export controls on quantum computers. This is intriguing. And what we don't know is whether this is export control people getting panicked by the headlines out of the China research groups that are making real fear, uncertainty, and doubt announcements about what their over-the-counter generic second-rate quantum annealing machine can do, or if the people who really know what's going on in NSA have told the export control people this is a problem for real. We don't know. A new attack on the math underlying the post-quantum computing competition was announced. And for 3 weeks, it was considered very, very dangerous and could break the whole thing wide open. If a quantum computer actually worked, it could rip the post-quantum math wide open. And it turns out there was a bug in the algorithm. It isn't believed fixable. But the fact that somebody's come up with an almost attack, there's a motto in cryptography, attacks only get better. Some people may forget how to attack a particular cipher, but somebody will remember and somebody will improve on it. But last December, IEEE's flagship magazine ran an article, Quantum Computing's Hard Cold Reality Check, and describes it as maybe closer than operable fusion electrical generation, which has been 25 years in the future for 30 years. This might be 15 years in the future and has been for 5 years now. But maybe it's 50-50 whether we get this or fusion power first. So the latest, this broke Monday, Tuesday. So I've been rewriting frantically here. And I do not have as much information as I'd like. Most of us hadn't even noticed a May paper where a Chinese researcher announced that they'd used a D-Wave Advantage trademark quantum annealing computer to factor RSA type numbers in a up to 50 bits. 26-bit times 23-bit, 24, 26 times 24 bits. And the and indeed, their math is good. The number they announce in the appendix does have those factors. But 50-bit RSA factoring is not impressive. It is impressive that they did it on a quantum annealing machine, because the general expectation is that you can't do interesting factorization on quantum annealing, and it would be a pain in the butt to do small numbers with it. And with a 5,000 piece quantum annealing lash up, they managed to do 50 bits. It's impressive how long they pounded their head against the wall. But general consensus is just don't scale up to anything dangerous. And that's the paper we have access to. Here's my check on their calculation. Yep. If they're factoring on the quantum annealing as opposed to a quantum computation system like IBM's, there's a difference. It's in the review notes. That would be interesting, and I can't spell. Oh well. If it's scalable to do 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 bit semi-primes, that would falsify the belief that quantum annealing isn't usable for Shor's algorithm. That would be amazing. This doesn't say that. If it took them 5,000 quantum whatever's D-Wave has that aren't really qubits, and they call them qubits, if it took them 5,000 to do 50, they're going to need a massive machine running a long time and probably falling over before it finishes to do any real RSA keys factoring. So, yeah, we're not worried. But what hit the South China Morning Post on Monday, their time, they're claiming to have broken military-grade payload ciphers. We only use the RSA because it's so darned expensive to compute, to negotiate or exchange keys and to do signatures. But the actual messages in your HTTPS session or your secure mail transfers, the bulk connection, the payload, is using a symmetric, old-fashioned private key cipher whose made up just for once use key was negotiated using the RSA public key or equivalent technique. And AES is the approved for unclassified military grade use and civilian use. And it's similar to the old DES architecture in terms of having a scramble permute cycle iterated, but the DES used a Feistel structure for the block computation, where it operated on half the block at a time and then swapped because computers were small and slow back then. And that would let them do 64-bit blocks with 32-bit processors. And these days, we've got multiple 64-bit CPUs that can handle 128-bit numbers, and we can grab four or more cores and run them parallel. So we don't have to do that. So SNP is the modern um, double scramble architecture where you do a substitute and then swizzle um, and iterate, as in the picture on the right, which is very similar to the Feistel structure, but it's operating on the whole width of the block at every cycle, and is bit permuting instead of just block swapping the left and right half blocks. Um, we don't know yet because the paper is not in the journal that it was supposed to be in this week, and only the South China Morning Post paywall has the article. So we don't know if it's doing the standard number of iterations of substitute permute for the three ciphers they say they've broken, or if they're doing a um, 3 rounds or 3 less rounds than standard, which is sort of what attacks that work do. And guess what? The number of rounds is chosen to defeat the attacks that would work. It's a couple more rounds than can be exploited. So we don't know that it's as big a problem as the fear, uncertainty, and doubt media is claiming this week. And it's not AES, it's not military grade, it's three specific named ciphers that one of them is in use in some mobile devices where a lightweight replacement for AES, something more secure than DES, but is lighter weight for mobile use, lighter weight than AES. So, and the at least one of them was not a winner in NIST's lightweight competition, was passed over, and one of them is I guess, new variant of one of the ones that was in the competition, was passed over. So it's just it's not all there. Um, let's see. Do I have anything else I need to say about that that's not on the slide? So if it actually works on the D wave at full rounds uh, on the GIF 64 rectangle and present, um, it would be very interesting and suggests that a larger D wave annealing machine might be able to attack AES, at which point we might have to kick AES up to the next block size. This is interesting. It is plausible to me that quantum annealing might work um, for uh, solving one round at least, and maybe multiple rounds of these substitutions, even though it's not usable for the non-deterministic quantum factoring algorithms. So it's a cause for some slight concern. We really need to see the paper. Um, but everyone that's hyperventilating doesn't seem to know what they're talking about, and anyone that I would trust to know what they're talking about hasn't said much yet. So I'm listening. My historical vignette is the silk dress cryptogram. The academic publication was in August 2023, so that would be outside my news window, but the historical vignette doesn't have to be in my news window. And this went semi-viral last December when the academic involved released a uh, uh, cute Christmas themed um, animated graphic novel, I guess you'd call it. And I'm going to fire that up from my other device. And I'm hoping the audio works. It's not moving. When I tested before, it worked.
Yeah, I'm seeing the silk dress code. You're paging through it.
What'd you say, Jerry?
I'm getting the silk
Oh,
dress code. I just got the
I,
audio.
I, I, I found which I found where the play button was hiding. So a museum curator who does dresses professionally and for fun found an antique silk dress at an antique mall and found, after buying it, found a hidden pocket in the bustle. And there was crumpled paper in the pocket. And when they smoothed it out, it was a message. Translucent paper with words in a grid and some numbers. and the words don't make sense. And this was a mystery. And she wanted to know what's up with this. But there are things that look like time codes, and there were place names. She blogged this 10 years ago. And the code community hopped on it. I've presented on commercial telegraph codes in previous years. Federico brought one of his collection as well as mine. And lots of ideas, and none of them worked. Illegal gambling was a good guess, by the way. It just happened to be wrong. And it was rated in the top 50 unsolved codes and ciphers. Some historical cryptographers that I know of listed it on their wanted list. And as a result, come on, keep going, keep going. An academic at Winnipeg was bored over Christmas and spent his part of his Christmas break looking at it to entertain himself. And he was convinced it was a code book, but not one of the commercial code books that everybody had already checked. So where else could he look? Unfortunately, since this is an MP4, I can't turn the page. There we go. And being my kind of a nerd, he went through 170 of them. And telegraphy history discussed all the various things that people use the telegraph for. And there was an example of a cipher report of a weather observation taken on a certain day that was transmitted as a telegraph code. And that looked like the lines in the thingy. And I've discussed that weather codes are one of the easiest things Enigma sent to break, and they used that to break the rest of the Navy net. And there's the sample of the book. And there's what the Army Signal Service, Weather Service wasn't split off from Army Signals yet. And each station would telegraph their observations to the central office in DC. And this started before the Civil War, maybe. And they used a code book so that the telegrams would cost less money than if they sent the numbers of the observation, because the telegraph office would charge you more for a bunch of numbers than they would for a pronounceable word. So he guesses that the Army Signal Service weather code book might be what he needs. So using the estimate that the dress was from the 1880s, he tried to get those editions. Licensing restrictions with libraries are a problem. But his local librarian could get it from a U.S. university. Yay. And the National Weather Service's parent organization library also scanned a copy for him. Of one edition. While the microfiche is coming by FedEx. The scanned copy looked close, but not exactly right, so he's hoping the multiple editions in the microfiche work. And eventually it arrives. Where's he going to find a microfiche reader? Well, obviously the university library that did the interlibrary loan for him would have one. I have one. My kid thought it was a terminal. And the 1880s dress, it matches the 1887 code. 12 messages per sheet is 24 messages for the two sheets. And one of the stations was the town his university was in. Canadian-American cooperation to get continental weather. Go figure. However, even with the correct codebook, it wasn't totally smooth sailing. And the Canadians didn't follow format. Go figure. And so he looks up the historical weather for those days, and tries to run forward and backwards. This is delightfully nerdy. And he finally figured out that it was May 27th, 1888, by using the historical daily synoptic maps. These are the maps produced from these telegraph reports. And the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration Library had them for him. And here's a ledger book of the station reports. And the Climate Center at Purdue had copies of those station registers for most years for 450 stations. Awesome. Don't you love archivists? Raiders of the Lost Ark reference. Hey, nerd points for that. And the team digitizing the missing ones gave him scans of most of them, and Archives Canada managed to find the one that was still missing that he wanted most, his town. And he figured out how the Canadian format was subtly different. Armed with that information, which is just sweet. Then the question is, whose was it? The laundry tag says the dress was owned by a Bennett. A volunteer observer in Fairview, Illinois wouldn't have had everybody else's reports. So that doesn't make sense. They weren't even a telegraph observer. On the other hand, maybe she took a birthday trip. Or maybe it's a different Bennett. We don't know. The groups of each sheet is geographically clustered, which suggests the telegraph messages were coalesced in a telegram network. And so the sheets may have been at a relay station that was merging those two networks. Traffic analysis is a classical intelligence term that is complementary to code breaking to solve the organization of the units that are communicating. And he's using traffic analysis on the Army Signal Service weather messages 150 years later. He's trying to figure out if there was an employee in the Signal Service civilian side that would have been the Miss Bennett wearing the silk dress. And he puts in a Ralphie Christmas Story message here, throwback. But since I like both codes and old technology and weather forecasting, I think this is an awesome exercise. But we don't know what Miss Bennett this would have been. Possibly a Western Union telegram office employee as opposed to U.S. Army Signal Service employee. We don't know. But he did write a professional paper submitted to the Professional Journal of Unclassified Cryptography, and that'll be linked in the long form notes that I'll let Jabber post in a few days or something.